I remember the sound of the rain before it even touched the ground, the faint metallic tang in the air, the weight of the storm pressing down on my chest. That night, my husband Andrew pulled his Mercedes into the empty rest stop, the headlights casting harsh white against the boarded-up windows of a long-forgotten gas station. He didn't even turn off the engine. He just looked straight ahead, jaw locked in that smug, familiar way, and said the words that would change everything. "Get out!" His tone was sharp, efficient, the way he sounded when closing one of his ruthless hedge fund deals. No hesitation, no warmth, just cold instruction. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect." 37 miles. He'd calculated it perfectly. Too far for an Uber. Too remote for public transport. He thought he was brilliant, masterful even. But what Andrew didn't know was that I had been recording everything for 8 months. Every word, every slight, every betrayal. And Marcus, my brother, my anchor, was already parked behind the abandoned gas station waiting for my signal. I sat in the leather passenger seat, breathing in the scent of Andrew's cologne, mixed with the sharp tang of rain about to fall. I could feel the smirk curling at the corner of his lips, that smug satisfaction that always came when he believed he was in complete control. Just 3 hours earlier, we'd been sitting across from each other at Morton's Steakhouse, clinking glasses of champagne to celebrate our anniversary. But in Andrew's world, love and cruelty lived side by side. Tonight, he'd decided the celebration would end in punishment. I didn't argue, I didn't scream. I just pressed record on my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. My heart was hammering, but my voice stayed steady. "You're seriously doing this? Actions have consequences, Amanda," he said, his eyes never leaving the dark highway ahead. "You went behind my back, called my accountant, embarrassed me with your paranoid questions. Maybe a long walk in the rain will remind you who manages the money in this family." The words sliced through me, but they no longer burned like they once did. I had already numbed myself to his cruelty. The pearl earring I'd found under our bed 2 days earlier still sat in my jewelry box, a silent witness to his affair with his assistant, Nayan. The missing $10,000 from our account had likely gone to her, a trinket or trip to make her feel special. He thought I hadn't connected the dots, but I had. And tonight, every piece of his arrogance would be turned against him. I gestured toward the heavy clouds. "It's going to storm." He drummed his fingers against the steering wheel. "Then you'd better start walking. Unless you want to apologize right now and admit you were wrong." For a brief second, I remembered the woman I had been 6 months earlier. The woman who still apologized, who still thought the marriage could be salvaged if she just tried harder, loved harder, forgave more. That woman would have begged. She would have promised to do better. But that woman was gone. "I'll walk," I said, opening the door. The cold air rushed against my skin as I stepped onto the cracked asphalt. The rest stop was exactly as Andrew intended it to be: desolate, suffocating, abandoned to time and weeds, a place chosen for its isolation, its cruelty. He had even mentioned it casually a week earlier, like a man testing out a weapon before using it. "Imagine being stranded here," he'd said, "miles from anywhere." And now here I was standing in that imagined nightmare, except the nightmare wasn't mine. It was his. The Mercedes engine revved, headlights cutting through the growing darkness. I watched him check his phone, no doubt texting Nayan, proud of his clever punishment. Then the tires squealed, and he was gone. I counted to 60, watching his taillights vanish. The silence was thick, broken only by the low rumble of thunder. Then, with calm steps, I walked toward the gas station where Marcus's black truck waited like a sentinel. When he stepped out holding an umbrella and a thermos of coffee, I felt the tension in my chest loosen just slightly. "Did you get everything?" he asked. Every word I said, pulling out my phone. The screen glowed, recording stopped. He actually told me I need to remember my place. Marcus shook his head, disgust flashing in his eyes. 3 years of watching him control you was bad enough. But this... He gestured at the empty lot, the storm breaking overhead. "This is criminal abandonment. Rebecca's going to have a field day with this recording." Rebecca, the divorce attorney I had hired in secret. Valentina, the forensic accountant who had been tracking Andrew's offshore transfers for months. Marcus, my brother and bodyguard, who had installed the hidden cameras under the guise of home security upgrades. We were a team, and tonight the net we had woven so carefully was about to tighten. I sipped the hot coffee Marcus handed me, the warmth seeping into my trembling hands. By morning, Andrew would believe I had walked through the storm broken and humiliated, desperate to crawl back to him. What he would never suspect was that I was already checked into a hotel under my maiden name, with evidence stacked neatly in boxes waiting to bury him. "Valentina's ready?" I asked. Marcus nodded. She documented everything the moment he moved that $10,000 today. The audit goes back 2 years, offshore accounts, falsified tax records, the works. And Rebecca will file first thing tomorrow morning. With tonight's recording, it's airtight. As the sky split open with rain, Marcus and I climbed into his truck and drove away from the rest stop. I imagined Andrew sipping scotch in our living room, satisfied he'd taught his wife a lesson. He had no idea his empire was already collapsing. 8 months ago, when the first suspicious withdrawal appeared, I had chosen not to crumble. Instead, I had hired my own silent army. Every insult, every condescending laugh, every cruel manipulation had become fuel for a plan that would leave Andrew with nothing. And tonight, finally, he had given me the final piece of evidence I needed. The rain hammered against the windshield as Marcus steered us down back roads, careful to avoid the main highways. We had rehearsed this drive, mapped every turn. My hotel room was already prepared, clothes laid out, documents hidden, even an emergency credit card Andrew didn't know existed. "You know he'll come looking for you," Marcus said. "Let him," I replied, staring at the storm through the window. "He won't find the woman he abandoned tonight. She's gone." The hotel clerk would remember me arriving drenched, shaking, too distraught to speak clearly. It was all part of the plan: appear broken, appear small, while in reality I was holding the sharpest weapon imaginable, the truth. By the time Andrew discovered his accounts frozen, his office locked, and federal investigators waiting with questions, it would be too late. The man who had tried to leave me powerless in the rain would learn what real power looked like. And for the first time in years, I felt something new blooming inside me, stronger than fear, stronger even than anger. Freedom. The hotel lobby was warm and bright, almost jarringly so after the darkness outside. Water dripped from my hair onto the marble floor as I approached the front desk, my hands shaking just enough to look convincing. The clerk, a young woman with soft eyes, immediately reached for towels and wrapped one around my shoulders with a kindness I hadn't felt in years. "My husband," I whispered, letting my voice crack. "He left me at a rest stop. In the storm. I had to walk for miles before someone helped me." Her face shifted from concern to horror. Perfect. Every word she spoke, every detail she wrote into the incident report would become evidence. The plan was unfolding as Rebecca had outlined: appear vulnerable, leave a paper trail, let the world believe I was just a desperate wife abandoned in the rain. Meanwhile, the truth, my truth, was waiting quietly in the shadows, ready to strike. When I finally closed the door to my hotel room, I locked it, fastened the chain, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The room was simple, but safe. Safe. That word meant more to me now than luxury ever had. I pulled out my second phone, the one Marcus had given me free from Andrew's monitoring, and replayed the recording from the car. Andrew's voice filled the air, cold and precise. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Calling my accountant behind my back? Asking questions about our finances like you'd understand the answers. It's our money, Amanda. I manage it. You spend it on overpriced groceries and those ridiculous charity luncheons." His laugh cut through me like glass. I closed my eyes. Once I would have believed his version of reality. I would have doubted myself, replaying every moment until I convinced myself I had overreacted. But not anymore. I wasn't that woman anymore. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Valentina found 3 more accounts in the Caymans. He's been moving money for 18 months. 18 months. That was when the distance between us had begun, when the charm had started to crack. It was when he first introduced the idea of separate accounts for tax purposes, when he began disappearing at night with vague explanations about client dinners. 18 months ago, Andrew had begun preparing to erase me. Another message appeared, this time from Rebecca. "Judge Coleman approved an emergency hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring the recording." My stomach tightened. Judge Coleman was known for her sharp instincts for seeing through men like Andrew. I thought about her reputation, about the women she had already protected in her courtroom, and for the first time in months I allowed myself a flicker of hope. I changed into dry clothes from the emergency bag hidden in the closet, then sat at the desk and began writing. Not legal notes, not statements for court, but reminders for myself. Reminders of who I really was beneath the years of manipulation. I wrote about the career I'd had before Andrew, the portfolio I managed, the 30 million in assets I'd once overseen. I wrote about the promotion I turned down because Andrew said traveling would strain our marriage. I wrote about friendships, lost opportunities, missed dreams, deferred, all at his suggestion, all cloaked in the guise of love. My phone rang, pulling me from the page. Andrew's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. The voicemail came seconds later, his voice sharp with irritation. "Amanda, this is ridiculous. It's been 3 hours. The lesson's been learned." "Okay. Call me back and I'll come get you. Don't make this worse than it needs to be." I let it play out, then saved it to the second phone. Documentation. Proof. Evidence of his manipulation. 10 minutes later, another call. His tone had hardened. "I know you have your phone. Stop being childish. If you're trying to worry me, it's not working. I'm going to bed. You can find your own way home." But I heard it, the thin thread of panic weaving into his voice. For the first time, he was deviating from his script. I wasn't calling, I wasn't apologizing, I wasn't crawling back, and the silence was breaking him. At midnight, the calls came from a different number. 9, his mistress. "Hello, Amanda." Her voice wavered when I stayed silent. "Andrew asked me to call. He's worried. He said you two had a fight that you're not answering. He wants you to know he's sorry, and you should come home." Andrew. Apologizing. Through her. The absurdity almost made me laugh. The man who had never once admitted fault now sending his mistress to deliver a counterfeit apology. I hung up without a word. By 1 a.m. the calls came every 15 minutes. Andrew, his mother, even his business partner. Desperation was spreading like cracks through glass. I documented them all, each timestamp, each voicemail, each frantic attempt to reach me. The abandoned wife was supposed to be desperate for rescue. Instead, I was calm, silent, untouchable. I ordered room service, soup, salad, and a glass of wine. I wanted the receipt to show I was steady, composed, eating while the storm raged outside. Evidence that I wasn't falling apart. Evidence that the script was mine, now not his. At 2:30, a message from Mrs. Chin. "Our neighbor saw Andrew in your driveway with a flashlight looking under your car. Then he drove off fast. Everything okay?" He was hunting, searching for me, desperate to maintain control. He didn't know Marcus had moved my car days ago. He didn't know I was already gone, already beyond his reach. I pulled the curtains aside and watched the storm lash against the glass. Somewhere out there, Andrew was beginning to feel it, the unraveling of the world he'd built on lies. He thought he'd taught me about power. But tomorrow, when the markets opened and his accounts froze, when the investigators arrived at his office, when his mistress realized she had been a pawn, he would finally understand who held the real power. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., though I barely slept. My mind raced with every detail of the plan, every possibility, every outcome. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me, chaotic, relentless, but cleansing. By morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, muted but steady. I logged into our joint account and wasn't surprised to see another $20,000 gone, siphoned off at dawn. He was panicking, moving money frantically. But Valentina had already documented it all. By noon, the hotel suite had transformed into a war room. Valentina arrived first, dragging in 2 suitcases filled with documents, her sharp efficiency unshaken even by exhaustion. She spread everything across the dining table: bank statements, wire transfers, falsified tax returns. Color-coded tabs marked every lie Andrew had told, every theft he had committed. "The Cayman accounts are frozen," she said. "He tried to access them at 6 this morning. 3 failed attempts." Rebecca swept in next, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice a sharp blade cutting through legal jargon. She hung up, her expression grim but satisfied. "Judge Coleman moved the hearing up. 1 o'clock. And Andrew has already hired Richard Blackwood." I froze. Blackwood. The shark. A defense attorney so notorious he'd once gotten a pharmaceutical executive acquitted despite mountains of evidence. The fact that Andrew had retained him overnight meant he was already cornered, already desperate. But Rebecca placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Blackwood's good, but he can't argue with recordings and forensic evidence. We've had months. He's walking in cold. Marcus arrived last, lugging a box of surveillance footage. He connected his laptop to the television and pulled up the clips. Fair warning, he said quietly. This isn't easy to watch. The screen lit up with the sight of Andrew in our study at 2 a.m, rifling through the safe. My stomach tightened as I saw him carefully photograph documents, then place them back. Property deeds, power of attorney forms, my grandmother's lake house papers. He was creating forgeries, Valentina explained, her voice clinical but tinged with disgust. If you hadn't caught this, he could have replaced the originals piece by piece until everything was his. The next clip was worse. Andrew and Nayan in my living room, her wearing my robe, their laughter sharp and cruel. She actually believed me when I said the conference was mandatory. Andrew's voice filled the room. I've trained her well. A few more months and everything will be transferred. Then we can stop this charade. Nayan giggled, draping herself across him. The prenup really says she gets nothing. It's irrelevant, Andrew said. She'll never fight it. Amanda doesn't have the spine. I couldn't breathe. My robe, my living room, my life mocked like a play staged for their amusement. There's more, Marcus said softly. And I knew I needed to see it. I needed to see everything, no matter how much it hurt. The next video filled the screen with the dim light of our garage, time-stamped on a night I remembered clearly. I had been at book clubs sipping wine with women who thought my life was polished perfection. Meanwhile, Andrew was pacing between our cars, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, but the recording caught every word. Jennifer's been perfect. She has no idea I'm recording our conversations, every detail about Amanda's mother's estate, the Alzheimer's diagnosis. They're hiding the trust fund from their father. It's worth nearly $2 million. And Amanda doesn't even know it exists. My body went rigid. Jennifer, my younger sister, the girl I had protected for years, covering her gambling debts, making excuses to our parents, believing her when she promised she was trying to change. My own sister had been feeding Andrew information about my family, about secrets I hadn't even known. When did he contact her? My voice trembled. Valentina pulled up a call log. First contact 13 months ago. Regular calls began 10 months ago. Always when you weren't home. He's been paying her debts in exchange for information. The betrayal slammed into me harder than any of Andrew's cruelties ever had. My own blood, my sister had sold me out, and Andrew had exploited her weakness like a predator circling easy prey. Rebecca checked her watch. We need to leave for court in 30 minutes. Amanda, are you ready? I stared at the frozen frame of Andrew on the screen, his mouth twisted mid-sentence, and I felt something crystallize inside me. Show me the rest first, I said. I need to know everything. Marcus clicked into another folder. The screen filled with emails, Andrew's correspondence with his attorney dating back 6 months. The subject line was chilling in its coldness, Project Fresh Start. The emails outlined detailed plans for divorcing me. Psychological tactics to make me doubt myself. Financial maneuvers to drain assets and instructions for escalating emotional abuse to break my resistance. One line burned into my vision. The key is to make her believe she's going crazy. Gaslight, consistently deny conversations, hide objects, contradict her memories. By the time we file, she'll be too unstable to fight. Every moment of confusion over the past year flashed back like a nightmare reel. The dinner reservations he swore I'd never told him about. The jewelry that vanished only to reappear in strange places. The conversations about visiting my parents that he claimed never happened. I had thought I was losing my mind. I had written notes to myself in secret, terrified that dementia was creeping in early. But it wasn't me, it was him. It had always been him. Valentina laid out the final blow yesterday afternoon. Andrew transferred $3.2 million from his hedge fund's client accounts into a personal account in Panama, right before he abandoned you. He must have thought he had more time. Rebecca's lips pressed into a tight line. We filed the emergency petition this morning. Abandonment, fraud, embezzlement. With the recording from last night, he's finished. The weight of Andrew's crimes pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had stolen from his clients, targeted the vulnerable, exploited my sister, and gaslit me into questioning my very sanity. He wasn't just a cruel husband. He was a criminal, a predator, a man who had believed he could destroy me quietly while building his empire on lies. But today the storm would turn. When we arrived at the courthouse, the corridors loomed with marble and mahogany, intimidating in their grandeur. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I walked with Marcus on one side and Rebecca on the other. I wore the navy suit I'd bought in secret, a suit Andrew had never seen. He always said suits made women look too aggressive, but today I needed to look sharp, unbroken, and utterly prepared. Courtroom 4B smelled faintly of varnish and old books. Andrew was already seated beside Richard Blackwood, his new attorney. Blackwood's $1,000 haircut and expensive suit didn't hide the fatigue etched into his face. Andrew, for once, looked smaller than I remembered. His clothes wrinkled, his eyes shadowed, his arrogance cracked. But when he saw me, his expression twisted into pure rage. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Patricia Coleman entered, her black robes flowing like a tide of authority. She settled behind the bench glasses perched on her nose and began leafing through the files before her. "We are here for an emergency petition filed by Amanda Mitchell regarding marital assets and spousal abandonment," she said, her voice steady, commanding. "Mr. Blackwood, I see you've just been retained this morning." Blackwood stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We request a continuance to properly review the allegations." Denied. The judge didn't hesitate. "Your client allegedly abandoned his wife in dangerous conditions last night. Time is of the essence. Counsel, present your evidence." Rebecca rose with the grace of a woman who had been waiting for this moment. She pressed play on the recording. Through the speakers, Andrew's voice filled the courtroom. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect." The sound echoed in the silence. Andrew's face drained of color. Blackwood leaned in, whispering furiously, but Andrew shook his head, gesturing in panic. Rebecca's voice was calm, deliberate. "Mr. Mitchell has been systematically hiding marital assets for 18 months. We have documentation of offshore accounts totaling $8 million and evidence of embezzlement from his hedge fund totaling over $3 million. "Objection," Blackwood snapped. "Unsubstantiated allegations." "Then let's substantiate them," Rebecca countered, producing a stack of documents. Exhibits A through F, wire transfers initiated solely by Mr. Mitchell. Judge Coleman studied the pages, her expression darkening. "Mr. Mitchell, did you abandon your wife last night?" Andrew rose, straightening his tie, voice trembling. "Your Honor, there was a misunderstanding. My wife and I had an argument. It's a yes or no question. I left her at a rest stop, but she had her phone. She could have, during a storm, 37 miles from home." The judge's eyebrows arched. "How considerate of you." Laughter rippled faintly through the gallery. Andrew's jaw clenched. Rebecca wasn't finished. She pulled up photographs on the courtroom screen. Andrew, with Nyan, laughing, her draped in my robe. Credit card receipts for jewelry, plane tickets, hotel stays. Even a pearl necklace he had reported as stolen later traced to her. The courtroom door opened. Tom Chin from the SEC stepped inside, flanked by 2 federal agents. Andrew's head whipped around his face, collapsing into fear for the first time. "Your Honor." Tom said, "I apologize for the interruption. We have a warrant for Andrew Mitchell's arrest on charges of wire fraud and embezzlement." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously, whispers cutting through the air. Blackwood jumped to his feet. "This is highly irregular. So is stealing millions from client accounts," Judge Coleman replied dryly. "Agents, please wait until we conclude this hearing. Mr. Mitchell isn't going anywhere." Andrew sank back into his chair, eyes darting wildly. His phone lit up again and again, calls from his mother, his mistress, his partner, but there was no escape. Judge Coleman's gavel struck. "Given the evidence presented, all marital assets are frozen pending investigation. Mrs. Mitchell is awarded exclusive use of the marital home and temporary support of $10,000 per month. Mr. Mitchell is ordered to stay 500 feet away from his wife." Andrew exploded, standing face red. "That's insane. She doesn't need—" "Sit down," the judge snapped. "You abandoned your wife in a storm after hiding millions in assets. I am being generous, not holding you in contempt." Andrew collapsed back, defeated. My phone buzzed with call after call from Jennifer. I documented each one. Even now, my sister's desperation was bleeding into my world. Then, as if fate itself wanted the spectacle complete, the doors banged open and Nyan stormed inside. Her hair was disheveled, her dress wrinkled, her face flushed with fury. You said you were divorced, she screamed across the courtroom. You said the papers were filed. You said she was crazy. The judge sighed. Ma'am, please remove yourself. But Nyan wasn't done. She waved her phone wildly. I have text recordings. He promised me marriage. He said the money was his. Tom Chin's eyes lit up. Ma'am, we'd very much like to speak with you. The final nail. His mistress turning on him, his assets, frozen federal agents waiting at the door. The empire Andrew had built on arrogance and cruelty was crumbling in real time, and all I had to do was sit there silent, composed, and watch the storm he'd created consume him. The courthouse steps were a blur of microphones and flashing cameras, a storm of attention I hadn't asked for, but knew was inevitable. Rebecca guided me through the chaos, her hand firm on my arm as reporters shouted questions. Mrs. Mitchell, is it true your husband stole millions? How long have you been planning this? Will you be pressing additional charges? I kept my gaze straight ahead, the navy suit hugging my body like armor. I didn't need to answer. Andrew's mugshot would be on every evening news broadcast by sundown, his perfect facade shattered. The man who once bragged about commanding boardrooms couldn't even command his own story anymore. Back at the hotel, exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. I collapsed onto the couch, scrolling through a flood of messages. Some were supportive neighbors who claimed they'd always suspected something, acquaintances congratulating me for standing up for myself. Others were cruel Andrew's friends, dismissing it all as a misunderstanding, his mother's barbed texts, calling me vindictive and jealous. The most haunting call, though, came from Jennifer. My sister's name flashed across my phone again and again, until finally, against Rebecca's advice, I answered. Amanda, please, her voice cracked. I need to explain. You told him, I said flatly. About Mom's diagnosis, about Dad's trust, about everything. Silence. Then a shaky whisper. He said he wanted to protect you. He said you were too stressed, that you couldn't handle it. He paid my debts, Amanda. I didn't think. I closed my eyes. I could picture her sitting in her apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of her choices, clinging to the lies Andrew had spun for her. He played you, I said finally. Just like he played me. Her sobs on the other end of the line were real, raw, and strangely pitiful. I'm so sorry. I thought he loved me like family. Can we meet, please? Rebecca shook her head from across the room, silently mouthing no. But something inside me softened, if only slightly. Jennifer had betrayed me, yes, but she was also a pawn in Andrew's endless game of exploitation. Tomorrow, I said. Neutral location, alone. When I hung up, Marcus was already pulling up social media on his laptop. You need to see this, he muttered. Andrew's company page was imploding, clients demanding their money back, former employees confessing suspicions they'd once buried in fear. And then Nyan. She had gone nuclear, posting screenshots of texts, photos of luxury trips, even a shot of her draped across our bed. Her caption was damning. He told me his wife was unstable. He said she refused to grant him a divorce. I believed him. I was wrong. The internet doesn't forget, and by morning, every corner of Andrew's world was on fire. At 6:00 p.m., Margaret, his mother, released a statement through her lawyer. Andrew Mitchell is a respected member of this community. These allegations are the work of a vindictive spouse seeking financial gain. I almost laughed. Even now she clung to the illusion of her golden boy. She couldn't see what the world now saw clearly, a criminal unraveling. The next morning, a knock rattled my hotel door. Through the peephole, I saw Jennifer. She looked destroyed, hair, unkempt, eyes rimmed with red, clutching a manila envelope like a lifeline. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sank onto the couch, placing the envelope on the table with trembling hands. I printed everything she whispered, every email, every text with him. I want you to see. I opened the envelope. The first email was from over a year ago, Andrew's tone deceptively warm. He'd written about wanting to support me, better understand my family dynamics. The manipulation was masterful. His questions grew more specific with each exchange. What properties did our parents own? Were there trusts? Who held the wills? Jennifer wiped at her tears. He told me it was for you, Amanda, that he wanted to surprise you with help for Mom. You thought you were helping me, I said. My voice was steady, but inside grief churned. My own sister had been Andrew's informant. She had handed him the keys to my family's secrets. Then she pulled out another paper, her fingers shaking. Dad left something you didn't know about. A trust in your name, worth $2 million. The room tilted. What? He set it up before he died, she whispered. He knew about my gambling. He didn't trust me with money. But he wanted to protect you. Andrew found out through me. He's been trying to get it for months. I sat in stunned silence, the weight of betrayal and protection colliding in my chest. My father had seen through us all. He had hidden something from me, something even Andrew couldn't touch. Mom has something for you too, Jennifer added. She said she was waiting for the right time. An hour later, Marcus drove us to the memory care facility. Mom was having one of her rare, clear days, her eyes sharp, her words deliberate. I knew what he was, she said when I sat beside her. The way he looked at our house, our things, like he was cataloging assets, not visiting family. Your father saw it too. From her bedside drawer, she pulled out a small key. Safety deposit box. Your father put documents there before he died. He said you'd need them one day. My throat tightened. Even in his final months, my father had been protecting me. Back at the bank, Marcus and I opened the box. Inside lay a stack of documents that made my blood run cold. Forged loan applications with my signature, property transfer papers, for my grandmother's lake house bank statements from accounts opened in my name, but controlled by Andrew. My father had collected it all, labeling each with his handwriting. He will try to take everything. Don't let him. Marcus photographed each page. My hands trembled not from fear but from clarity. Andrew had built a web designed to strangle me completely. But my father's foresight had left me a knife to cut through it. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. David Brennan, Andrew's largest client, his voice tight with rage. Mrs. Mitchell, I've uncovered something. Andrew wasn't just stealing randomly. He targeted elderly widows. He convinced them to sign powers of attorney. He drained their accounts, then made them think they were losing their memory. My stomach clenched. It was Andrew's gaslighting playbook extended beyond our home. He hadn't just used it on me. He had weaponized it against the most vulnerable. Eleanor Hartley. David continued. 78 years old. He took $800,000 from her, and he convinced her she was developing dementia. I pressed a hand to my chest, the sickness rolling through me. He hadn't just destroyed my trust, he had destroyed lives. David's voice hardened. I've been recording partnership meetings. I'll turn them over to the FBI. It's time he pays. When I hung up, I looked at Marcus and Jennifer. The air felt heavy, electric, like we were all standing on the edge of something massive. Andrew wasn't just a bad husband or even a greedy fraud. He was part of a network of predators, and the storm was bigger than any of us realized. Driving back from the bank, my mother's words echoed in my mind. Men like him never expect women like us to fight back. They mistake kindness for weakness. Andrew had left me in the rain to teach me a lesson. But what he hadn't understood was this: storms don't break everyone. Sometimes storms create thunder, and I was ready to strike. 4 months later, I walked into the federal courthouse for the beginning of Andrew's criminal trial. By then, the scandal had exploded beyond anything I could have imagined. His arrest had been front-page news, but the deeper investigations had turned him from a disgraced husband into a symbol of corruption, one man at the center of a web of financial abuse that spanned years, states, and countless victims. Reporters crowded the sidewalks, their microphones angled toward the steps. My heels clicked against the stone as I climbed, wearing a charcoal gray suit I had chosen deliberately professional, dignified, and untouchable. No trace of the broken wife he had abandoned in the rain remained. Inside, Andrew sat at the defendant's table. His once pristine hair was unkempt, his face thinner from months in custody. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment his eyes widened. I gave him a smile, the same serene smile I used to offer over morning coffee back when I played the part of his dutiful wife. But this time, it was a smile weighted with truth, justice, and the knowledge of his impending downfall. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Torres, laid out the charges in measured tones: 12 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of elder abuse, 1 count of conspiracy to commit financial crimes. As he spoke, the evidence poured out like a tide. Andrew couldn't stop doctored books, offshore accounts, forged documents, recordings of his own voice bragging about his schemes. For 11 days, witnesses took the stand. Elderly clients who described how Andrew had tricked them into signing papers they didn't understand. former employees who testified about the pressure to falsify records, forensic accountants who walked the jury through the labyrinth of shell companies he had built. Each piece of testimony chipped away at the mask he had worn so carefully. And then on day 12, the courtroom doors opened and in walked Nyan. She looked nothing like the polished mistress who had once flaunted my pearls. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her clothes conservative, her expression somber. She had been granted immunity in exchange for testimony, and now she was about to bury him with it. 18 months, she said, when asked about their affair. Her voice was quiet but steady. During that time, he told me everything. How he was hiding money, how he was targeting elderly clients. He called it three-dimensional chess, said everyone else was playing checkers. She handed over recordings from her phone conversations where Andrew bragged about using me as a cover about his plans to disappear to Costa Rica. In one recording, his words were chilling Amanda's perfect, sweet trusting. She'll never see it coming. By the time she does, she'll be left holding the bag. But the most devastating blow came when Nine revealed that even she had been disposable. 3 weeks before his arrest, she said, her voice faltering, he told me he was leaving me too. He had another woman waiting in Costa Rica. Someone younger, someone new. Andrew's face twisted, his jaw slack. Even his mistress had learned the truth. He was a man incapable of loyalty to anyone, not even those who helped him betray me. The following day brought another shock. A young man named Christopher Walsh took the stand. He was only 22, but his resemblance to Andrew was undeniable. His jawline, his eyes, it was like looking at Andrew's arrogance reborn. "I'm Andrew Mitchell's son," he said simply. "He paid my mother $1,500 a month for 22 years to keep me secret." The money came directly from his client accounts. The courtroom gasped. Andrew lowered his head, shame, or perhaps exhaustion, pulling at his shoulders. The prosecutor displayed bank records spanning 2 decades, showing the hush money that had been siphoned from stolen funds. Andrew's attorney tried to argue irrelevance, but Judge Coleman was firm. This establishes a pattern of deception and exploitation spanning the defendant's entire adult life. And then came the moment that sealed his fate. Against his lawyer's protests, Andrew insisted on testifying. He thought he could outtalk everyone, that his charm and intelligence could still bend the narrative. For 2 hours, he spun stories where I was complicit, where his clients had approved every transaction, where his crimes were misunderstandings. But under cross-examination, his mask cracked. Shown recordings, he claimed they were taken out of context. Shown forged documents, he suggested I had created them. Shown records of hush money, he called it a personal matter. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. On every count, guilty. I sat in silence as the verdict was read, Marcus gripping my hand on one side, Rebecca's steady presence on the other. When the final guilty echoed through the courtroom, Andrew slumped forward, his empire gone, his lies exposed. The man who had left me in the rain to teach me a lesson was about to learn what abandonment really felt like. 2 weeks later at sentencing, Judge Coleman's voice carried the weight of justice. "Mr. Mitchell, you targeted the most vulnerable. You betrayed trust on every level, professional, financial, personal. You show no remorse even in the face of overwhelming evidence. This court sentences you to 96 months in federal prison, without the possibility of early release. 8 years. As bailiffs led him away in shackles, Andrew turned and mouthed, "This isn't over." I stood, my voice clear. "You're right, the civil suits start next month." And then he was gone. 6 weeks later, the whistleblower reward came through $1.2 million for my cooperation in recovering stolen funds. Combined with the trust my father had left me and the assets awarded in court, I suddenly had more resources than I had ever imagined. But money wasn't the goal. It was never the goal. Marcus found the building, first an old Victorian in Minneapolis, 3 stories tall, with worn wood floors and rooms that echoed with possibility. By Monday, it was ours. We named it the Phoenix Foundation, a place for women like me, women trapped in cycles of financial and emotional abuse, women who needed protection, strategy, and a chance to rise from the ashes. Valentina set up the forensic team. Rebecca handled the legal aid. Marcus oversaw security panic buttons in every office, cameras positioned for safety instead of control. And I sat with the women who came to us, listening to their tears, their stories, their fears. I looked into their eyes and saw myself reflected back. Our first client was Maria, a teacher whose husband hid their savings and threatened her with deportation even though she was a citizen. Within weeks, Valentina found the money, Rebecca filed the papers, and Marcus got her safely out. I held her hand as she cried in relief. Jennifer came too. 3 months sober, she arrived at the foundation with donuts in her arms and shame in her eyes. "I want to help," she said softly. And she did. Her own mistakes gave her a strange kind of credibility with women who felt trapped by guilt or fear. Slowly, she became the voice on the other end of the phone when desperate women called the one who told them they weren't alone. Even Nayen returned, her hair cut short, her voice trembling but honest. She spoke to college students about predators in business suits, about the dangers of believing charm over truth. She admitted her own failings, but also warned others of the red flags she had ignored. The Phoenix Foundation grew. Women found freedom, safety, and second chances. Every story was a reminder that the night Andrew left me in the rain wasn't just the night I found my freedom, it was the night I became a shelter for others. One day my mother visited. She was having a clear afternoon, her memory steady as she walked through the halls of our foundation, looking at the framed photos of women who had rebuilt their lives. "Your father would be proud," she whispered, her eyes shining. "He always said the best revenge against cruelty is kindness to others." That evening, I sat in my office staring at the framed letter Andrew had sent me from prison, 4 pages of rage ending with the words, "I hope you learned your lesson." And I realized I had. I had learned that when someone shows you who they are, believe them. I had learned that patience and planning can turn the tables on even the most powerful abuser. And most of all, I had learned that strength is not just surviving for yourself, it is using your survival to lift others from the darkness. The man who left me in the rain to break me ended up teaching me the most valuable truth of all storms: don't destroy everyone. Some of us become the storm. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the strength hidden inside even the darkest nights, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment with your thoughts, your favorite moment of justice, or even your own story. Together, we can make sure no one ever feels alone in their storm.